Hello, friends. If this joke tickled your funny bone, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's an easy way to keep the humor flowing into your feed. Don't miss the last one. That is special joke for you.
A redneck with a bucket full of live fish was approached by a Texas game warden. The game warden asked the man, "May I see your fishing license, please?" "No, sir," replied the redneck. "I don't need any of them's papers. These here are my pet fish." "Pet fish?" "Yep. Once a week I bring these here fish of mine down to the lake and let 'em swim round for a while. Then when I whistle, they swim right back into my net, and I take 'em home." "What a line of baloney. You're under arrest," the redneck said. "It's the truth. I'll show you. We do this all the time." "We do now, do we?" smirked the warden. "Prove it." The redneck released the fish into the lake and stood and waited. After a few minutes, the warden said, "Well, what?" said the redneck. The warden asked, "When are you going to call them back?" "Call who's back?" "The fish," replied the warden. "What a fish?" asked the redneck. Blonde was on vacation in the depths of Louisiana. She wanted a pair of genuine alligator shoes, but didn't want to pay the high prices. After unsuccessfully haggling with one of the shopkeepers, the blonde said angrily, "Maybe I'll just go out and catch my own alligator so I can get a pair of shoes at a reasonable price." The shopkeeper smiled and replied, "Go ahead. Try to catch a really big one while you're at it." Later that day, while on his way home, the shopkeeper spotted the young woman standing waist-deep in a swamp, shotgun in hand. He stopped to look, and just then he saw an enormous alligator swimming toward the blonde. She took aim at the alligator and bam! She scored a perfect bullseye and, with some effort, managed to haul the alligator onto the swamp bank. The shopkeeper suddenly noticed that several more of the dead creatures were lying around the blonde. The shopkeeper watched in amazement as the blonde flipped the alligator on its back and shouted in frustration, "Damn! This one isn't wearing any shoes either!" A husband and wife were having a fine dining experience at their exclusive country club when this stunning young woman came over to their table, gave the husband a big kiss, said she'd see him later, and walked away. His wife glares at him and says, "Who was that?" "Oh," replies the husband, "she's my mistress." "Well, that's the last straw," says the wife. "I've had enough. I want a divorce. I'm going to hire the most aggressive, meanest divorce lawyer I can find and make your life miserable." "I can understand that," replies her husband, "but remember, if we get a divorce, it will mean no more wintering in Key West or the Caribbean, no more summers in Tuscany, no more Cadillac STS in the garage, and no more country club. And we'll have to sell the 26-room house and move to 2 smaller homes. But the decision is yours." Just then, a mutual friend enters the restaurant with a gorgeous young woman on his arm. "Who's that with Jim?" asks the wife. "That's his mistress," says her husband. She replies, "Ours is prettier." The husband was met at the door by his sobbing wife. Tearfully, she explained, "It's the druggist. He insulted me terribly this morning on the phone." Immediately, the husband drove downtown to arrest the druggist and demand an apology. Before he could say more than a word or two, the druggist told him, "Now, just a minute. Listen to my side of it. This morning, the alarm failed to go off, so I was late getting up. I went without breakfast and hurried out to the car, but I'll be damned if I didn't lock the house with both house and car keys inside. I had to break a window to get my keys. Driving a little too fast, I got a speeding ticket. Then about 3 blocks from the store, I had a flat tire. When I finally got to the store, there was a bunch of people waiting for me to open up. I got the store opened and started waiting on these people, and all the time the darn phone was ringing its head off. Then I had to break a roll of nickels against the cash register drawer to make change, and they spilled all over the floor. I got down on my hands and knees to pick up the nickels. The phone is still ringing, and when I came up, I cracked my head on the open cash drawer, which made me stagger back against a showcase with a bunch of perfume bottles on it, and half of them hit the floor and broke. The phone is still ringing with no let-up, and I finally got back to answer it. It was your wife. She wanted to know how to use a rectal thermometer. Well, mister, I told her. Our teacher asked what my favorite animal was, and I said, friend, chicken. She said I wasn't funny, but she couldn't have been right because everyone else laughed. My parents always told me to tell the truth, so I did, but my teacher sent me to the principal's office for it. I told the principal what happened. He laughed, but then told me not to do that again. The next day, my teacher asked me what my favorite live animal was. I told her it was chicken. She asked me why, and I told her, because you can make it into a friend chicken. She sent me to the principal's office again. He laughed, but told me not to do that again. I don't understand. My parents taught me to be honest. But my teacher doesn't like when I am. I decided to follow what my parents taught me because they always tell me all they want from me is to become a good man. And a good man never lies. Today my teacher asked me what famous person I admired the most. I said, Colonel Sanders? Guess where I am now. A man in a hot air balloon realized he was lost. He reduced altitude and spotted a man below. He descended a bit more and shouted, "Excuse me, can you help me? I promised a friend I would meet him half an hour ago, but I don't know where I am." The man below replied, "You are in a hot air balloon hovering approximately 30 feet above the ground. You're between 40 and 42 degrees north latitude and between 58 and 60 degrees west longitude." "You must be an engineer," said the balloonist. "I am," replied the man. "Oh, but how did you know?" "Well," answered the balloonist, "everything you told me is technically correct, but I have no idea what to make of your information, and the fact is, I am still lost." The man below responded, "You must be a manager." "I am," replied the balloonist. "How did you know?" "Well," said the man, "you don't know where you are or where you are going. You made a promise that you have no idea how to keep, and you expect me to solve your problem. The fact is, you are exactly in the same position you were in before we met, but now somehow, it's my fault." Lawyers should never ask a Georgia grandma a question if they aren't prepared for the answer. In a trial, a Southern small-town prosecuting attorney called his first witness, a grandmotherly, elderly woman, to the stand. He approached her and asked, "Mrs. Jones, do you know me?" She responded, "Oh, why, yes, I do know you, Mr. Williams. I've known you since you were a boy, and frankly, you've been a big disappointment to me. You lie, you cheat on your wife, and you manipulate people and talk about them behind their backs. You think you're a big shot when you haven't the brains to realize you'll never amount to anything more than a 2-bit paper pusher. Yes, I know you." The lawyer was stunned. Not knowing what else to do, he pointed across the room and asked, "Mrs. Jones, do you know the defense attorney?" She again replied, "Why, yes, I do. I've known Mr. Bradley since he was a youngster, too. He's lazy, bigoted, and he has a drinking problem. He can't build a normal relationship with anyone, and his law practice is one of the worst in the entire state. Not to mention he cheated on his wife with 3 different women. One of them was your wife. Yes, I know him." The defense attorney nearly died. The judge asked both counselors to approach the bench and, in a very quiet voice, said, "If either of you idiots asks her if she knows me, I'll send you both to the electric chair." A farmer named Patty had a car accident. He was hit by a truck owned by the Eversweet Company. In court, the Eversweet Company's hotshot solicitor was questioning Patty. "Didn't you say to the police at the scene of the accident, 'I'm fine'?" asked the solicitor. Patty responded, "Well, I'll tell you what happened. I just loaded my favorite cow, Bessie, into I didn't ask for any details," the solicitor interrupted. "Just answer the question. Did you not say at the scene of the accident, 'I'm fine'?" Patty said, "Well, I just got Bessie into the trailer and I was driving down the road." The solicitor interrupted again and said, "Your Honor, I am trying to establish the fact that, at the scene of the accident, this man told the police on the scene that he was fine. Now, several weeks after the accident, he is trying to sue my client. I believe he is a fraud. Please tell him to simply answer the question." By this time, the judge was fairly interested in Patty's answer and said to the solicitor, "I'd like to hear what he has to say about his favorite cow, Bessie." Patty thanked the judge and proceeded. "Well, as I was saying, I'd just loaded Bessie, my favorite cow, into the trailer and was driving her down the road when this huge ever-sweet truck and trailer came thundering through a stop sign and hit me trailer right in the side. I was trown into one ditch and Bessie was trown into the other. By Jesus, I was hurt, very bad-like, and didn't want to move. However, I could hear old Bessie moaning and groaning. I knew she was in terrible pain just by her groans." Shortly after the accident, a policeman on a motorcycle turned up. He could hear Bessie moaning and groaning, too, so he went over to her. After he looked at her and saw her condition, he took out his gun and shot her between the eyes. Then the policeman came across the road, gun still in hand, looked at me and said, "How are you feeling?" Now, what the heck would you say? My first time buying at age 16, I went to the pharmacy. The hot cashier at the counter could see that I was new at it and gave me the pack, asking if I knew how to use one. I said, "No, it's my first time." She took one out, put it on her thumb, and told me to make sure it was on tight. I still looked confused. She looked around the store to see if it was empty, and it was. "Just a minute," she said, and locked the door. She led me to the back room and took off her shirt and bra. "You like these?" I could only nod my head. She said to put. As I was putting it on, she dropped her skirt, removed her panties, and laid down. "Come on," she said. "We don't have much time." So I climbed on her. It was so amazing that I couldn't hold back, and kapow! I was done in 2 minutes. She looked at me concerned and asked, "Did you put?" I said, "I sure did," and held up my thumb to show her. A guy goes into a store and tells the clerk, "I'd like some Polish sausage." The clerk looks at him and says, "Are you Polish?" The guy, clearly offended, says, "Well, yes, I am, but let me ask you something. If I had asked for Italian sausage, would you ask me if I was Italian? Or if I had asked for German bratwurst, would sausage me if I was German? Or if I asked for a kosher hot dog, would you ask me if I was Jewish? Or if I had asked for a taco, would you ask if I was Mexican?" "Would you, huh? Would you?" The clerk says, "Well, no." With deep self-righteous indignation, the guy says, "Well, all right then, why did you ask me if I'm Polish, just because I asked for Polish sausage?" The clerk replies, "Because this is Home Depot." One hot summer afternoon, a police officer pulls into a yard. The police officer then gets out of the car and asks an old gentleman, "Who owns the property?" The old man tells the officer that he does and asks what he can do for him. The officer said, "I'm here to inspect your property for illegally grown drugs." The old gentleman says, "Well, you go right ahead, but whatever you do, don't go into that field over there," pointing out a fenced parcel of land. The officer said, "Mister, I'm a law enforcement officer authorized by the federal government of our nation." Reaching into his pocket, he removes his badge and shoves it right in the old boy's face. "You see my badge, buddy? This badge means that I'm allowed to go wherever I wish, anytime I wish. Do you understand me?" No questions asked. The old gentleman nodded his head. Yes, politely, softly apologized, and went about his chores. A short time later, the old gentleman heard someone screaming in absolute terror, coming from where he'd told the officer not to go. He looked over at the pasture and saw the officer running for his life, chased by a very angry bull. With every step, the bull was gaining ground on the officer, and it appeared likely that the policeman would be gored by the bull's horns before he could reach safety. Realizing the horrible danger that the policeman was in, the old gentleman ran to the field's fence as fast as he could, determined to do whatever it could to help. Reaching the edge of the pasture, the old gentleman quickly climbed to the top of the fence, waving his arms frantically and screaming at the very top of his voice, "Your badge, officer! Show him your badge!" A sign on a restaurant window says, "If you order it and we don't have it, you instantly win $1 million. A man walking by notices the sign and walks in the restaurant and sits down at the table with a smirk on his face. The waiter asks what he will be having, and the man says, "I will have white rhinoceros stew, please." The waiter comes out with a boiling hot bowl of exactly what the man ordered. The man is taken by surprise, but he eats the stew and pays for his very expensive meal. He leaves angrily. The next day he comes back and sits at the table with a smirk on his face again. He tells the waiter, "Today I will have bullet ants stuffed with dolphin meat." The waiter leaves and quickly comes back after a few minutes with exactly what the man ordered. The man, surprised again, eats his meal angrily, pays, and leaves. The next day he comes back and sits at the table and tells the waiter, "Today I will have a lactating mermaid breast sandwich." A few minutes go by, and the waiter comes out holding 2 massive duffel bags with the $1 million. The man, overcome with excitement, says, "I knew it! You don't have a mermaid breast." The waiter tells him politely, "We actually have it, sir. It's just that we ran out of bread." A pair of hot twin sisters, one blonde, the other brunette, get invited to a Halloween party. The theme is snacks, so they decide to go as a pair of popular candy bars. The party is a real blast, and the brunette is having tons of fun. But the blonde is just kind of off to herself with no one giving her any attention. Anytime a guy approaches the pair, he gives all his attention to the brunette. She makes out with a dude dressed as M and M's, another dude dressed as Doritos. Eventually, she hooks up and disappears with a guy in a hot dog costume. "I don't get it." The blonde complains to her sister when she eventually reappears with a big, satisfied smile on her face. "We are virtually identical in everything but hair color. But at this party, you get all the guys and I get nothing but awkward stares." "Don't you get it, sis?" says the brunette. "It's your costume. Almond Joy's got nuts, but Mounds don't." One night, a guy dropped his girlfriend at her doorstep. As they were about to wish each other good night, the guy started feeling a little in the mood. With an air of confidence, he leaned with his hand against the wall and, smiling, said to her, "Honey, would you give me a kiss?" Horrified, she replied, "Are you mad? My parents will see us." "Oh, come on. Who's going to see us at this hour?" he asked, grinning at her. "No, please. Can you imagine if we get caught?" "Oh, come on. There's nobody around. They're all asleep." "No way. It's just too risky. Oh, please, please. I love you so much." "No, and no. I love you too, but I just can't." "Oh, yes, you can. Please." No, I just can't." "I'm begging you." Out of the blue, the light over the doorstep came on, and the girl's elder sister showed up in her nightgown, hair disleveled, and in a sleepy voice said, "Dad says to go ahead and give him a kiss, or I can do it. Or if need be, Mom says she can come down herself and do it. But for God's sake, and for all of ours, tell him to take his hand off the doorbell." A large woman caught a thief, and without thinking twice, she pinned him down and sat on top of him. She then called out to her son, "Billy, quick! Go get your dad! I've caught a thief!" From the other room, Billy shouted back, "Mom, I can't find my shoes!" Gasping for air, with his face barely visible under her, the thief managed to wheeze, "Kid, just wear mine." A group of Hell's Angels, South Carolina bikers were riding east on 378 when they saw a girl about to jump off the PD River Bridge. So they stopped. George, their leader, a big burly man of 53, gets off his Harley, walks through a group of gawkers, past the state trooper who was trying to talk her down off the railing, and says, "Hey, baby, what you doing up there on that railing?" She says tearfully, "I'm going to commit suicide." While he didn't want to appear sensitive, George also didn't want to miss this be a legend opportunity either, so he asked, "Well, before you jump, honey babe, why don't you give old George here your best last kiss?" So with no hesitation at all, she leaned back over the railing and did just that. And it was a long, deep, lingering kiss followed immediately by another, even better one. After they breathlessly finished, George gets a big thumbs-up approval from his biker buddies, the onlookers, and even the state trooper, and then says, "Wow, that was the best kiss I have ever had. That's a real talent you're wasting there, Sugar Shorts. You could be famous if you rode with me. Why are you committing suicide? My parents don't like me dressing up like a girl." It's still unclear if she jumped or was pushed. A programmer and his project manager board a train headed through the mountains. They can find no other place to sit except for 2 seats right across the aisle from a young woman and her grandmother. After a while, it becomes quite clear that the woman and the programmer are interested in each other, as they keep looking at each other. Soon, the train passes into a tunnel, and it is pitch black. There is the sound of a kiss, followed by the sound of a slap. When the train finally emerges from the tunnel, the 4 sit there without saying a word. The grandmother thinks to herself, "It was very rude of that young man to kiss my granddaughter, but I'm glad she slapped him." The project manager thinks to himself, "I did not think the programmer was brave enough to kiss the woman, but I wish he hadn't missed him when she slapped me." The young woman thought to herself, "I am glad the guy kissed me, but I wish my grandmother had not slapped him." The programmer has a satisfied smile on his face and thinks, life is good. How often does a guy have a chance to kiss a beautiful woman and slap his project manager at the same time? A handsome man in a suit approaches a young lady at a bar and asks if he can buy her a drink. "Don't you have a girlfriend?" she asked. "Guys like you always have girlfriends." He looked downcast. "No, sadly, we broke up just over a month ago." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," she said. "Okay, then, I'll have a white wine, please." 1 glass of wine led to a second. A few drinks later, after a kiss and a cuddle, they headed off back to her place and made passionate love. While he was putting his clothes back on, she said, "So, you're good-looking, a nice guy, and amazing in bed. Can I ask why on earth you split with your girlfriend?" He said, "My wife found out." 3 rough-looking bikers stomp into a truck stop where an old-timer is having breakfast. One of the riders extinguishes his cigarette in the old guy's pancakes. The second biker spits a wad of chewing tobacco into his coffee. The third biker dumps the whole plate onto the floor. Without a word of protest, the old guy pays his bill and leaves. "Not much of a man, was he?" says one of the riders. "Not much of a driver either," says the waitress. "He just backed his truck over 3 motorcycles." An 80-year-old man went to the doctor for a checkup, and the doctor was amazed at what good shape the guy was in. The doctor asked, "To what do you attribute your good health?" The old-timer said, "I'm a golfer, and that's why I'm in such good shape. I'm up well before daylight and out golfing up and down the fairways." The doctor said, "Well, I'm sure that helps, but there's got to be more to it. How old was your father when he died?" The old-timer said, "Who said my father's dead?" The doctor said, "You mean you're 80 years old and your father is still alive?" "How old is he?" The old-timer said, "He's 100 years old, and in fact, he golfed with me this morning. That's why he's still alive. He's a golfer." The doctor said, "Well, that's great, but I'm sure there's more to it." "How about your grandfather? How old was he when he died?" The old-timer said, "Who said my grandpa's dead?" The doctor said, "You mean you're 80 years old and your grandfather's still living. How old is he?" The old-timer said, "He's 118 years old." The doctor was getting frustrated at this point and said, "I guess he went golfing with you this morning, too." The old-timer said, "No, Grandpa couldn't go this morning because he got married." The doctor said, in amazement, "Got married? Why would a 118-year-old guy want to get married?" The old-timer shot back, "Who said he wanted to?" One afternoon, the lady of the house appeared unusually upset and distressed. Her usually calm demeanor was replaced with a sense of unease that even the household staff couldn't ignore. After finishing her chores, the maid, Lily, noticed her employer's troubled expression and couldn't help but ask, "Ma'am, is everything all right? You look so worried. What's troubling you?" With a heavy heart, the lady sighed deeply before replying, "Oh, Lily, I hardly know how to say this, but your boss, my husband, has started an affair with his office secretary." Lily was taken aback by the revelation. Shocked and a bit confused, she quickly responded, "No way, madam. That can't be true. You must be saying this just to tease me, right?" An elderly man found himself in a peculiar situation one day when his wife ran away with the family driver. The news spread quickly through the town, and soon enough, curious neighbors and friends began to approach the old man, eager to hear his reaction. They gathered around him, their faces a mix of concern and intrigue, and asked, "What will you do now?" The old man, however, seemed unfazed by the situation. With a calm demeanor and a slight smile on his face, he paused for a moment before replying, "What can I do? Life goes on, doesn't it? I guess I'll have to drive the car myself now." One evening, a man returned home from work feeling a bit mischievous. He decided to play a light-hearted prank on his wife, hoping to catch her off guard. As she was busy in the kitchen, he tiptoed up behind her, carefully placing his hands over her eyes. With a playful tone, he whispered in her ear, "Guess who?" She let out a deep sigh and, without hesitation, responded, "Oh, come on. Your jokes are getting so predictable and old." She paused for a moment, adding a touch of playful sarcasm. "Now, seriously, hurry up and get out of here before my husband gets home." One afternoon, little Johnny was happily taking a bath in his backyard, splashing around without a care in the world. Just as he was enjoying his time, a beautiful girl from the neighborhood happened to walk by and accidentally caught a glimpse of him. The innocent mishap quickly spread through the neighborhood, and before long, it became the talk of the town. Concerned, the matter was brought before the community elder, who acted as the local judge. Little Johnny, feeling both embarrassed and flustered, stood before the judge, his cheeks flushing. "Judge, that girl saw me while I was bathing," he exclaimed, clearly upset. The judge, trying to maintain order and calm the situation, asked, "So, Johnny, what do you want me to do about it?" Johnny hesitated for a moment. Then, with determination in his voice, he replied, "I want to see her in the same condition now. Judge fainted." One evening, in a bid to break their routine, an 88-year-old husband decided to take his young wife to a boxing match. The arena buzzed with excitement as they found their seats, the crowd roaring in anticipation. The bell rang, and the fighters stepped into the ring, their muscles tense and ready for action. But just as the match began, within seconds, one of the boxers took a heavy punch and went down, sprawling across the mat. The husband, visibly irritated, leaned back in his seat and scoffed, "Unbelievable!" He couldn't even last a minute before hitting the floor. What a waste of a fight. His wife, who had been quietly observing both the match and her husband's reaction, turned to him with a sly smile. Leaning in closer, she muttered just loud enough for him to hear, "Well, now you know how I feel." The husband chuckled and said, "Well, if it's any consolation, at least he didn't have to live through the rest of the fight like I do." Four old guys are walking down a street. They turn a corner and see a sign that says, "Old Timers Bar, all drinks 10 cents. They look at each other and then go in, thinking this is too good to be true. The old bartender says in a voice that carries across the room, "Come on in and let me pour one for you. What'll it be, gentlemen?" There's a fully stocked bar, so each of the men orders a martini. In no time, the bartender serves up 4 iced martinis, shaken, not stirred, and says, "That's 10 cents each, please." The 4 guys stare at the bartender for a moment, then at each other. They can't believe their good luck. They pay the 40 cents, finish their martinis, and order another round. Again, 4 excellent martinis are produced, with the bartender again saying, "That's 40 cents, please." They pay 40 cents, but their curiosity gets the better of them. They've each had 2 martinis and haven't even spent $1 yet. Finally, one of them says, "How can you afford to serve martinis as good as these for a dime apiece?" "I'm a retired tailor from Phoenix," the bartender says, "and I always wanted to own a bar. Last year, I hit the lottery jackpot for $125 million and decided to open this place. Every drink costs a dime. Wine, liquor, beer, it's all the same." "Wow, that's some story," one of the men says. As the 4 of them sip their martinis, they can't help noticing 7 other people at the end of the bar who don't have any drinks in front of them and haven't ordered anything the whole time they've been there. Nodding at the 7 at the end of the bar, one of the men asks the bartender, "What's with them?" The bartender says, "They're retired people from Florida. They're waiting for happy hour when drinks are half price. A couple in their 90s are both having problems remembering things. They decide to go to the doctor for a checkup. The doctor tells them that they're physically okay, but they might want to start writing things down to help them remember." Later that night, while watching TV, the old man gets up from his chair. His wife asks, "Where are you going?" "To the kitchen," he replies. "Will you get me a bowl of ice cream?" "Sure." "Don't you think you should write it down so you can remember it?" she asks. "No, I can remember it." "Well, I'd like some strawberries on top, too. You'd better write it down because you know you'll forget it." He says, "I can remember that." "You want a bowl of ice cream with strawberries?" "I'd also like whipped cream." "I'm certain you'll forget that, so you better write it down," she retorts. Irritated, he says, "I don't need to write it down. I can remember it. Leave me alone. Ice cream with strawberries and whipped cream. I got it for goodness sake." Then he grumbles into the kitchen. After about 20 minutes, the old man returns from the kitchen and hands his wife a plate of bacon and eggs. She stares at the plate for a moment and says, "Where's my toast?"
If you're still here, I'm thrilled you enjoyed the joke. Subscribing is a simple way to stay connected. Join our community and make me a happy friend.